Hi, Ambrose. Thank you so much for being with us with the interview today. And thank you to all of our watchers who I'm sure will appreciate hearing what you've got to share with us. Firstly, how many years were you homeschooled for?
Well, I was homeschooled my whole life, basically, up till I started at university. So from basically the age of like four years old to 18. Yeah. So
Wow.
my whole school education was homeschooling.
Wow. And did you follow any curriculum or was it just different things here and there?
Well, it was a combination of multiple things. So we did when I moving into my kind of high school education, we did use a lot of resources from Memoria Press. And I also signed up to a number of classes through Memoria Academy, which is um, a classical Christian education academy based in the United States. And they run a lot of really good courses online and also publish heaps of textbooks. And also for most of my high school years, I did the Great Books program, which is a program based in the United States from Angelicum Academy. And so yeah, those were kind of like the two main sort of curricular sources during my high school years. But I did use a range of other textbooks, and I know there's many good Catholic ones out there like Seton and others. But yeah, a combination of things as well as private tutoring. Sometimes we had uni students kind of tutor us in different disciplines.
And did you feel that you were better educated through that than if you'd been in a mainstream school? And if so, how and why?
Well, I never went to a mainstream school, so I can't tell you exactly, but judging from the experience of some of my friends and my, uncles and aunties, I'm very grateful for being homeschooled, and I do think I have benefited very much from the education I received, um, particularly in how, like for example, with Memoria Academy, how traditional and solid their education is. So for example, their Latin courses are very much focused on memorization and learning things piece by piece and building upon your memory, and which is something that's being more and more lost, I think, in mainstream education, at least from what I've observed, is the use of memorization. And even when I was actually quite young, before Memoria Academy, I had a really old Josephite nun who did some lessons with me, and she would get us to like memorize tables and that kind of more old school, retaining your memory and not just having to Google everything or look up everything 10 times and then forget it again and look it up. So I feel like I've definitely benefited from that more traditional approach to learning. And the kind of, even though I was on doing online courses, a lot of the time I was just reading the great books or, spending time with my siblings because we were all homeschooled together. And I think a lot of people miss out on all that reading time and time and reading and learning in the context of the family as well, which I think really, really helped me in my homeschooling years.
And would you say, because I know you've been at uni and you've done really well and you've gotten heaps of distinctions and like a high distinction and a Latin prize, would you say that homeschooling has helped you to achieve highly in uni?
Well, it definitely laid the groundwork for me. So what I did with this Great Books program is it was a 4-year course, and you read the great books of, well, some of them, the great books of the ancient Greeks and the Romans and the medievals. Then you move into the moderns, and that course actually, I was able to gain a lot of credit to um, enter Campion College and basically skipped the first year of the degree there. Thanks to all the prior studies I'd done. So yeah, the homeschooling I did kind of acted like a springboard into Campion College where I still am at the moment. And having as a young boy already kind of been studying the humanities has really helped, now as an adult, moving on to further and deeper studies at Campion. So yeah, definitely laid a lot of the groundwork and has, yeah, pushed me forward a lot.
And what was your favorite part of the study at homeschooling and then at Campion? Like your favorite
Homeschooling.
subject?
Well, it's hard to say exactly, but I'll try and give the best answer. Well, reading the great books I found was really great experience. And it's Mortimer J. Adler who was one of like the big proponents and I suppose like advocates for the great books movement in the US. He said how, you know, you get to have a conversation with with the people of, past ages, learning about the greatest things that have been said and done and engaging in that great conversation that has been come down to us through the centuries. What is it to live the good life? And, how should we live and how we should think and engaging with all these great ideas and in a sense being able to converse with all these different authors like whether it's Socrates or Shakespeare, being able to engage in that conversation with them and feel them as your teachers was I found a really great experience, to have as your teacher, even though, I didn't understand everything that was I read, or, definitely bits of Socrates where I'm like, what's he trying to say? Um, but to have them as your teacher and guide and to be able to engage in that great conversation that has been happening over the centuries, I found that amazing. And at Campion, well, I found the classroom experience at Campion really good, but having that kind of transferred to kind of like outside of class, even like at the lunch table or just casually around the campus, you have a lot of interesting conversations. And I think that, it's one thing to like sign up to a degree, but it's another thing to like really engage with the material. And it's outside of class where you do a lot of learning as well. And, whether it's having really thought provoking conversations or being challenged by others with differing views or my Protestant friends, we have a lot of very interesting conversations and being able to, I suppose, continue to, sharpen each other um, outside of class. I've enjoyed that a lot.
And I know, because I know you did the diploma in classical languages, and what motivated you to do Greek and Latin? Because especially in a day where like a lot of people are like, oh, Latin's a dead language, so why bother?
Well, I suppose it was things like the great books, because if you really want to go deeper into these great authors and these great texts, well, they weren't all written in English, particularly very few were written in modern English. And so if you want to go deep into, like, for example, Virgil's poetry, you know, you can only go so far when it's still in English. But when you're able to get into the Latin, and I'm not like, a fluent reader or master of Latin or anything yet, but when you have those moments where you can just one word in Latin can have so many connotations and so much deeper meaning when you understand one line in the text in its original language, it's very powerful. And I think even though the diploma of languages at Campion, it's a fair bit of extra work and time. I was motivated because I really wanted to, I suppose, continue the great conversation, um, hopefully one day in the original languages, and also motivated for other reasons, like as a Christian, there's um, so many of our central texts are in Greek and Latin, like the church fathers and the scriptures, and wanting to read those beautiful, beautiful writings of like Bernard of Clairvaux, for example, um, who was one of like the greatest writers of his time. He wrote all in Latin, and to one day be able to read that would be amazing. So yeah, that was one of the motivators for me.
Wow. And on a slightly different note, would you say that homeschooling How would you say that homeschooling helped to form you in the Catholic faith?
Well, I do think that when it comes to formation in the faith, it always has to start in the home. And the home is central because uh, it's in the context of your family life that you are able to grow in virtue and be schooled in the truths of the faith because in the old law before the Levites, the father of the house was the priest of each house. And so when in the context of your home, your father and your mother, they are there as your, I suppose, not only your models, but your teachers. And in a sense, your father is the priest. He leads you in prayer and in a way, prays on your behalf to God all the time. And I have a lot to be grateful for to my family. And I found that, things like, for example, our family will do a lot of reading aloud together. So reading aloud of the lives of the saints or reading aloud books like The Liturgical Year by Dom Granger and going deeper into the life of the church. And all these things, doing this as a family and traditions associated with the church's calendar and being able to pray together as a family. All these things have been really, really central to me in being formed as a Christian. And I definitely think if I didn't have it in the home, I wouldn't have gotten it elsewhere because then there are very few kind of places um, in our, I suppose, post-Christian world where you have that opportunity. Very few um, fully Catholic schools, and even if you do have a good Catholic school, and there are a few out there um, in Australia, you still have to have the home as the center of education and formation in the truth and the truths of the faith.
And so now that you've taken your homeschooling education and gone to uni and you're almost finished, what are your plans for the future? And do you think your education in the home will help with that?
Well, last year at Campion, I was like going down all the avenues of like, okay, I don't want to be a disorganized uni student and finish the degree and not know what I'm doing. So I was looking at different places to do further studies. And I was thinking about continuing with the classics. But at this stage, I'm not going to do further studies when I finish my degree this year. But I'm hoping to go overseas and visit some Benedictine monasteries and experience monastic life and I suppose yeah, have a taste of what that will be and whether such an avenue is potentially something for me. So that I suppose would only be possible, that kind of I suppose desire to search out monastic life, if I suppose that was really made possible by the parish and the family that I've been formed by and the great, Catholic and classical education I've received. I suppose, you know, many are called, but few are chosen, and I pray that, all the graces I received haven't been wasted, but that hopefully how can I put this? That, I've been given a lot, God's not everyone is so blessed to have had such a great family or education, and I think hopefully God will use that for the best down the track.
Wow, that's so cool. And one last question is, do you have any study tips specifically for homeschoolers, but like just anyone studying?
Study tips. I'd probably say don't be a rat bag. Because that's something I wasn't very good at in my as a young child. I was a bit of a rat bag, and if you want to get your education done, you got to obey your parents. As starting out as a young child, obey your parents, do your schoolwork diligently, and don't be a rat bag like I was in my younger years. Um, for older students, I'd probably say um, don't muck around. It's so tempting when you have something on hand, like, oh, you might have 2,000 words to write by next week or tomorrow night. And, oh, just like check what everyone's doing on, Facebook, or I'll just toggle across from Word to like browse something random on the internet, or you'll procrastinate by doing something else. If there's something to be done, just get it done. There's no point in putting it off because otherwise you just regret all the time you've wasted. So, you know, to have you have to have a lot of self-discipline as a homeschooler. And if you don't learn it when you're young, it's a lot harder to pull it out when you're older. So making sure that you set yourself little goals, and it doesn't have to be like, all right, I'm going to sit down for 9 hours and do this essay. It can just be like, all right, I'm going to sit down and do an hour of devoted study, and then I'll take a break. um, you just have to make sure you have that self mastery. So I suppose it's a virtue you have to grow in, but self discipline is very important if you want to succeed as a homeschooler and then as a uni student. So, yeah.
Okay, that's such a good tip. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Oh, thank you for having me.